What makes a fighter legendary? What does a fighter have to do in order to be remembered 10 years after they retire? Today we'll discuss what separates UFC card hype trains from UFC card legends. So I just got done talking with Damien over at UFC Card Talk, and this question was brought up by Maddie Mac. And it was a fun conversation, so I kind of wanted to elaborate a little further here and post it to my own channel. In the comments below, what makes someone a fighter that would be talked about forever in the sport? And in order to get to that conclusion, I think we need to look at some of the people that have done actually that in not only in the UFC card world, but in the MMA history books. And I think if you look at people like Jones, like GSP, like Mighty Mouse, like Khabib, like Anderson Silva, and I think the reason that these names keep popping up over and over again on other people's lists is not because of hype, is not because of what they did on the microphone.
But I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to fight you in the near future.
But is what they did in the octagon, and that was win and dominate opponents. The hype narrative needs to die. That isn't what sustains card prices over long periods of time. That isn't what gets people into the UFC history books and what cements people's legacies in MMA fans' brains. Hype and what they do on the mic, and even in some cases entertainment, is not what does that. For entertainment purposes, let's look at GSP, a person that is listed on, everybody's top 5 list and should be, was in his day not seen as a very entertaining fighter. There was a lot of people who thought that GSP's heavy wrestling style was boring. It wasn't entertaining. And what happens is over time, people forget the zeitgeist and forget popular opinion. And what they go back to is the results, which was winning, sustained winning, and a great resume. I think there are a couple people that the hype and entertainment narrative actually fits, but I think that is the exception and not the rule. I think that Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor are two people that throughout time had achieved high levels in the sport, but were still able to maintain and be relevant, not only with card pricing, but also in the pop culture sphere of MMA through their persona, through their entertainment value on the mic, and through entertaining fights, but they did lose. So I think that is a very rare exception to the rule. They're the only people off the top of my head that can lose and maintain relevancy. And in order to drive home my point even a little further, let's look at almost the inverse relationship of someone that had very little to no hype, but had incredible accolades in Demetrius Johnson, aka Mighty Mouse. So Dana almost completely wiped out the division that Mighty Mouse was in because of lack of popularity and lack of talent in that division when he was fighting with the UFC.
We've been talking about shutting down the flyweight division for about 3 years.
Oh, really? And Mighty Mouse hasn't even been with the UFC for years, and he is still maintaining relevancy within the sport and within the UFC card hobby. So in my opinion, the criteria that needs to be met in order to have sustained UFC card prices for long periods of time and to be cemented in the UFC and MMA history books is the same thing. And that criteria is, being one of the best to ever do it in your division. I think you really need to separate yourself. There's so many fighters in the division. There's so many good fighters in the division that I think there really has to be a separation between the upper echelon that will forever be remembered and kind of just all the good fighters that there are. In order to do that, you have to have sustained winning at the highest level. So whether that's a crazy undefeated or unbeaten streak, or that's a crazy title defense record. Also, I think some really key storylines could need to happen. Either incredible title fight moments. For example, Leon Edwards' head kick with Usman, that's a moment that will be forever remembered in time. Or be a part of a huge epic rivalry like Khabib versus Conor, one of the biggest pay-per-views of all time. Or have a career filled with some insane finishes. Lyoto Machida versus John Jones, when Jones choked him unconscious, comes to mind. The flying armbar that Demetrius Johnson did in the title fight. When Anderson Silva entered the Matrix with Forrest Griffin. These are all moments that will be replayed over and over again. And with the people's insane resume, I think that these finishes, these storylines can prop people up and keep people's card prices and keep them in the history books and being talked about by MMA fans forever. In summation, no matter how long the UFC card community or the MMA community continues to ignore people that don't have hype behind their name, as long as they continue to win, I think that the card pricing will be there long term, and I think they will be remembered for decades to come.